Welcome to the Life as an Observer podcast. My name is Ryan Bean. I am your host in self-observation. This podcast is an exploration of physical and non-physical self through discussion around yoga, meditation, self-improvement, self-realization, and practices that elevate the mind-body-soul connection. Let's start observing. This episode of Life as an Observer is made possible by patron support. If you'd like to support this program, you can visit patron.podbean.com/lifeasanobserver to learn more. Today I'm meeting with my friend Crystal Palacio, and we're going to chat a little bit about some of the stuff that she's done in her military service, but really more about what's happened after her military service. I'm coming to you from outside because it's another one of those scorching days here in southern Utah, and it's kind of nicer to be outside. So before we jump into the conversation with Crystal, which really we're going to talk a lot about alternative healing modalities, some of the things that she's doing with cleaning of water and just getting involved outside of what the military offers. It's a really beautiful experience, especially if you're a veteran and you're curious and looking for alternative healing modalities with visionary veterans, or if you're saying, hey, I've experienced some of this, but now what? Well, before we jump into that conversation, I want to talk to you a little about some of the things that I'm doing. Now, hopefully, really soon, my TED Talk should be available entitled The Language of Breath. Yes, it's part of the philosophy of the Language of Breath Collective, and I'm trying to get that out so as soon as I can. I had to give them a few references and some peer-reviewed journals to make it legitimate, but as soon as that's out, you'll get it. It'll be probably part of a newsletter. If you're not on that newsletter, jump on my link below. It's for my Popple landing page. I actually give everybody a discount to Popple. If you click on that page, you'll see it at the top of the landing page. A little discount to join it. It's the best digital business card I've ever used, and no, they're not a sponsor, not yet. Maybe they'll listen to this here and realize that, hey, maybe I should be, because I talk about Popple all the time. I love it, and I think it has been one of the best tools, not only for this podcasting business, but the stuff I'm doing with breath work and retreat leading, and even just to be an affiliate for some of the products that I do love, like the ones from Hemp Lucid. You've heard me talk about these before. Popple has been the best way for me to share that information and to capture leads. If you're looking to gain more emails for your emailing lists, or to find ways to have really this call to action within your business card, Popple is the way to do it. I think that my discount link gives you a few percentages off your first purchase, but really they're only like $20 to buy this thing, and it will change your business forever. Again, this is not a paid advertisement. I just love them. So let me tell you a little bit some of the things that I'm doing. I have a few retreats coming up. I have a few Wim Hof methods coming up, and you can find those just by kind of going onto that landing page, but also WimHofMethod.com if you are interested in seeing some of that, especially if you're in the southern Utah or near Las Vegas area. That's basically where I reside most of the time. I have a couple of retreats coming up at our good friends Flanagan's, but really the ones that I want to jump ahead to, I do have I'm going to be up near Anchorage and Seward, Alaska next month between the 7th and 12th of June. If you're around, message me or come find me. Now you can see some of the events I'm doing. I'm doing 3, and you can find that at hormetichealing.com. I'm going to go ahead and share that link for Hormetic Healing, so you can join those retreats. I think they're only like $30 a class, and you can come and get in some cold water with me. You can breathe with me and maybe do some sound therapy. It's going to be a great thing. When I get back from the 22nd to the 25th of June, I'm going to be at Summer Revival. That is our euthanogenic church here in Utah, and it is a mushroom church, if you will. And I'm going to be facilitating breathwork, silent disco style, 2 nights on Friday and Saturday night, and of course, being a part of all things yoga and speaking and talking about our First Amendment protected right to practice our religion without worrying about the legalities of it. So I'd like you to maybe put that on your calendar, or just check out the Divine Assembly. It's a great place for those resources. In July, I'll be at a clinician retreat in northern Utah near Park City. Sorry, as the wind picks up here, you might be hearing it on your end, but we're outside today. Before that, let me talk about San Diego. So I'm going to be down in San Diego over the 1st of July, 1st and 2nd. If you're interested in joining me there, I'll be at Joy Wellness doing ketamine-assisted breathwork, or ketamine breathwork, I guess what we're calling it. And you're welcome to join. I can give you the information about how to meet me in San Diego. I'll be in Park City the 7th and 8th doing a clinician training for ketamine breathwork. And then I'm back to Las Vegas on the 15th of July to do a Wim Hof method at our friends Vibe 28 and IMR Float. Now after that, the week after, I'll be in Colorado at the Language of Breath teacher training in Silverton, Colorado. That one is particularly, it is closed. It's closed. We're totally full and sold out on that one. But you can join for the 2024 session if you'd like. You can find that information at languageofbreathcollective.com and sign up for the 2024 training. Now, I'll tell you, the online training is still available, not to be a teacher, but to be a practitioner, and you can join that. I have a link in the bio or the show notes about how to join the Language of Breath training. In doing so, this is the first step in ketamine breathwork. So you have to take the Language of Breath first, and then you take the ketamine breathwork training after that. So that link is below. If you're interested in getting into working with psychedelics or breathwork, it's a great way. And I offer a discount code to my listeners. It is Ryan50 at checkout, and you're going to get $50 off that training, making it, I think, $350. So really great training for 7 weeks with myself, and Jesse Coomer is who leads that primarily. The week after that, I'll be at the Psychedelic Conference in LA. I would love to see you guys if you're heading down to LA and you want to chat with me about psychedelics or ketamine, or if you're interested in breathwork, I'm happy to chat with you about that. And then I applied to speak at FloatCon in August. We'll see if that happens. If not, I'm looking to head up to Montana or somewhere to get out of this heat. So we'll see what happens, because right now it is entirely too warm in southern Utah, and I'd like to get out of Dodge. So lots happening, including the release of my 2 new journals. So if you haven't seen them yet, if you don't follow me, get on my mailing list. All you got to do is go to the Popple page and give me your email address, and you'll get on the page. I'm going to be sending out a newsletter shortly, but I've just released 2 journals. One is for breathwork, and one is for psychedelic trip reporting. They are both available on Amazon under just my name, Ryan Tyler Bean, and you can look for breathwork log and journal, and also the psychedelic trip report and journal. They're both about 120 pages of just really immersive content, allowing you to really get in the right mindset for both those sessions and to document it properly. And that's what's most key. I'm really excited about these books because there's really nothing else on the market that is like them. They're similar, but not like what I've put in there. And there's little quotes each day to kind of keep you motivated for your breath work, and little drawing pages on the psychedelic one. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, they're pretty affordable, and they're on Amazon. I will put the link in the notes as always. Hopefully that works, so you can find it and order your copy. I will tell you, these are the preface to me releasing my kids' book. So if you have kids out there, somebody who could use some mindfulness with their children, I'm offering some kids' books in the very near future, which I'm going to be releasing on Amazon also, at least until maybe a publisher likes them and wants to pick them up, and then that would be me manifesting something that I really, really want. But for now, I'm self-publishing them and putting them on Amazon. These are the SS Meditation Journeys, and they'll be on the Amazon Marketplace within the next couple of weeks. So if you're at all on Amazon, you'll see them there, and I'll put a link also in the bio for that. So today we're going to meet with Crystal Palacio. And Crystal is a friend of mine that we've been working together with visionary veterans. She's an Army veteran, and got out with the military as a disabled discharge for mental health reasons. And she is opening up to us today about why that is and how that happened after 16 years of service, and some of the stuff that she's been able to accomplish post leaving the military, and kind of the journey that she's been through with helping veterans and giving back, especially for mental health awareness. And I think this is really an important topic because I too suffered from this and was too ashamed to really talk about it. So no one knew that I was dealing with some mental health issues. I'll share this in vulnerability, but I was living a facade of a life that I am not really it wasn't really who I am, which included massive amounts of drinking, partying, and really disassociating from my life. And I did not have the transition assistance that I wanted or could have used. And so Crystal has been really kind of the epicenter for helping veterans in this transition process And I'm just really grateful that the work that she's doing, especially that she's doing with, and giving back to not just veterans, but veterans giving to others with her Waves to Water project and some other. I think it was. She talks a lot about this and how they're giving these filters to others to be able to clean their own water, and it's just really, really neat. Not only that, but just with visionary veterans and some of the ways she's trying to raise money and she's trying to get veterans the help that they need. So, without further delay, I'd like to introduce you to my friend Crystal from Visionary Veterans. Enjoy the podcast. This one's about an hour and a half long. We talk about a lot of things from transitioning to where we're at now and what are the next steps, and also some of the events that she's up to. So enjoy the podcast, and I'll see you on the next Life as an Observer. Hi, Crystal. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, Ryan. It's good to be here.
So I don't really know where you are right now. Tell me, what part of the country are you in? I know you've had a few moves and you have even one coming up, but where are you at now?
Currently, I am in San Antonio, Texas.
San Antonio, okay. But you might have been in New Mexico, probably. Is that where you were?
No, sorry, you're breaking up a little bit. Prior to this, I was in North Carolina for about 10 years.
Okay, North Carolina starts with an N, not New Mexico, North Carolina.
I would have loved New Mexico.
I live really close, but I don't usually get over there. The only time I've gone in through New Mexico is when I go through the Four Corners, and I'm actually getting ready to do that in July, which is pretty cool. I'm going to go over to the lower part of Colorado, and to get there from where I live in southern Utah, you have to go through the Four Corners, and it's kind of an interesting journey through the 4 points of the states, even though they all look the same pretty much. Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, and Colorado, where they meet in that four corner part on a reservation. They all look the same pretty much, but so it goes. So you're in San Antonio, and I know that you're supporting your partner here on his military journey, but you've had your own military journey and yes. now you're off into civilian life, but still supporting veterans. And that's kind of what I wanted to chat about today. Because at least from my own military journey, I felt as though I got out very unprepared for what was next for me. And I don't know if you have the same sentiment for me, but you served how many years in the Army?
Almost 16. It was like 15 years and 8 months by the time I got out.
15 years. You were almost retirement, and said, nope, this is not where I'm at. I did 10, and I was ready to get out too. And people said, why didn't you want to retire? Why didn't you stay in? And we all have our many reasons why we decide to depart for be prior to retirement, right? But tell me what your transition out of the Army was like for you. For me, it was just like a quick couple days, and I felt like I was not ready to face the real world after that. I was still not ready.
Yeah, it was really tough for me, actually. I definitely did not feel ready. I mean, being in for that long, my goal was to serve 20 years, and I actually medically retired. And it was for mental health reasons. I think like my actual paperwork had about 5 main things, and then there was like 36 additional things going on. I mean, there was just a lot. I had really put mind, body, spirit through the ringer during my service, to the point where, I just kind of, at the time, I didn't really understand what was going on. I was like, I don't know if I'm depressed. I don't know if it's my ADHD. I don't know, if this is burnout. But really, I have been like burning the candles at both ends for so long. And I was just so depressed that I was like very suicidal and just couldn't do my job at the time. And I was actually about to go out on my 6th deployment when I had to raise my hand and say like, hey, like, I can't do this. And I think I need to talk to someone. And that was probably one of the hardest things to do. Just, like 1, ego, 2, like having to like be responsible for your teammates, and then to not go forward with them, but also to know that like, I would never want to be a liability. And I really had to like swallow my pride and just be like, this is not going to work. And so I didn't know that doing that was going to be the beginning of me getting out of the military. I had a lot of addiction issues at the time, and being a medic and, you know, holding on to narcotics and things like that. As soon as I said I had an addiction issue, like, you know, I wasn't able to do those things. As soon as I said I was suicidal, I wasn't able to have any weapons or go down, you know, go to the range. So all of those things make you like non-deployable. And within the military, like the whole job is readiness. Like, can you go out of the door? And so I started seeing a mental health professional within the military. And that's when they're like, oh, you know, have like major depression. I think you're an alcoholic, and all of these things are going on. They started giving me a bunch of medications. And what I didn't realize at the time was that once you actually start going to therapy, it just kind of like starts to muddy the waters, and all the things that you had been repressing and, you know, not dealing with, like, then you're actually going to have to deal with it. And then having to do that while in the military was just really hard. And I also didn't know that drinking while on antidepressants wasn't a good mix.
And no, that's not usually the best combination of therapy necessarily. But did you find that your therapy sort of opened your eyes to what was actually really happening, or were you still sorting through that? Because, you know, when some people go into therapy, they're like, I did not realize that I was even doing that, and it's brings. Yeah, maybe there is something called PTSD that I didn't realize that I had. Did you find that therapy brought that to light, or were you sort of still kind of in denial about what was happening?
It was so early on. I was definitely like in denial, lots of resistance, lots of just very unaware and disassociated. You know, like I had been in the military at that time for, you know, maybe 14 years. And so I had a very I have a super strong mindset, and, you know, anything that is like weakness is, you know, like you just don't deal with it, and you just kind of, you know, you drink and you cope and you party and you don't really talk about things, and you just suck it up and drive on, right? And then it's like, oh, what, you can't suck it up anymore? Like, what's wrong with you? And so I definitely wanted to try to like fix myself, but at that point I was just like too tired, you know, that whole like sick and tired of being tired adage. And so it did open my eyes up a lot to just the power of vulnerability and honesty. Like I just like started just, you know, being honest about what was going on. Cause like, you know, at first it's like, oh, you go on a deployment and you do these like post-deployment health assessments, and they ask you like, you know, how much do you drink and how are you feeling? Do you ever have these kinds of like thoughts? And you know the game, and so you know exactly what to say, that you don't like raise any red flags.
Right.
Once again, you just carry on. So for like once, I was actually just honest, and it was really amazing to just see like like the weight that lifted, as much as that also muddied up waters. But then when I actually like accepted that maybe I do have a drinking problem, when finally they were like, hey, you know, you're not getting better, and if you're not getting better, you're probably gonna have to leave the military. And that was like I felt very disillusioned and angry, where it's like, okay, I come to you and I say I have an issue, and then you're just saying like, hey, if you're not on this timeline, like,
get out.
Goodbye. Yeah. So I was really like disillusioned at the time. But in that like breaking down of, you know, everything I had known, and in that just opening up, it actually like gave me the freedom. At the time I didn't see it, but I think I was like just at my wit's end with everything, that I just kind of leaned in to the radical honesty and to the vulnerability, and just kind of realizing like, you know, so I actually ended up doing like a month of inpatient rehab while in the military to just kind of stop drinking. And because I was like, I don't want to just go to a class and watch a PowerPoint with a bunch of other people for like a substance abuse thing. I was like, I want to actually like put me in a place where I don't have the opportunity to do these things. And it was actually a really great program. They came at it from a multiple like use. So like actually having like a psychiatrist that looked at all the different medications you had been on, while having like an occupational therapist, while having like a counselor, and also, you know, it was in a hospital, so you're able to get like all these different scans and things done. So I was actually really lucky I did that, and it introduced me to AA and NA. And I remember being in an NA meeting, and me and my battle buddy, this girl that we had a lot of similarities with, we were talking about this theme of like, you know, I feel like I'm still looking for my rock bottom, you know, like where you're being like very self-sabotaging, and you're just kind of like, how much further do I need to go? And the thing I loved about NA is like these old timers that are just like, sweetheart, like, you're there, like, drugs, institution, or death. Like, well, guess what? This is an institution. And he gave me this like bit of knowledge that really was like a great insight, where he said, you hit rock bottom when you stop digging. And I was like, oh, and it made me think about that like idea of like having agency. Like if you're just looking through a rock bottom, you're constantly putting yourself in these situations and that victim mindset and all of these kinds of like ideas. Or if you're just like, okay, you know what, this is it. Like you're there, like now how do you actually pull yourself out of it?
Isn't that kind of like a law of attraction, like base principle, right? Though, like if you're looking for something that's called rock bottom, you're gonna keep looking and looking, and you know, and that's where you're gonna look. And if you just accept where you are in this present moment, then you can actually change your path or your direction from here. Keep digging, and that's what you're looking for. You're looking for it to get even worse, or you can actually look for it to be better, right?
Exactly.
And I don't want to point fingers or blame, but I find that the system itself sort of intuitively wants us to go into that space that you're talking about, that says, you know, be kind of numb to the things around us. I know from my time of deployments, it was like, you know, we're almost told to not have feelings in a way. I mean, yeah, you can have feelings and emotions, but in a way it was like, that's the enemy and this is us, and that's way over there, and we're going to go over there and we're going to take care of some stuff and we're going to come back victorious. And it was just like this mentality, especially for me. I was in Somalia during a pretty heavy time, and I think we both did a few deployments in some of the areas which we call the sand traps, or you know, and there was just sort of this like us against them mentality, which in a way kind of at least made me feel like an elitist. And then here I was suffering with my own mental health, saying, well, hold on, I'm not really an elitist. I'm actually kind of, you know, like I'm kind of part of this system now, where I need help, you know? And I remember being on a deployment and saying, why am I here? Like really what we're doing is we're churning the pot, or you're shaking the bee's nest, or whatever, you know. Like I felt like that in a few times where I was like, they don't really want us here, and we don't really want to be here, and yet we're here preserving something. And we didn't really, for me at least, I didn't really understand what I was preserving. I just was following orders, you know. I was just like, I'm gonna go there and do this thing, and then I'll come home 6 to 9 or maybe a year later, you know, just I didn't know. And in the meantime, when I had a moment of reprieve from following orders and to being scared for my life, we would be in a port or a place where we could have a drink. And that was the place where we would go to say, I don't have to play that role of, you know, BDUs and carrying a weapon anymore. I can actually just be a human. And that human interaction most of the time included drinking and included debauchery. We'll just say, you know, especially when you're an 18-year-old. You know, for me, I grew up in Utah, so you're 18 years old, and maybe, well, at the time, I guess when I was first deployed, I was 19, and you know, you can't drink in the United States, but you can in other places of the world. And so, guess what? That's exactly what we did, which we had no clue. And I remember I was in medicine also. So I remember being a part of Shore Patrol for a few times, and people coming back just really super intoxicated because they didn't know their limits, you know?
Yeah.
And we would do this thing called clam shelling. I don't know if you guys did that in the army or not, but clam,
No,
clam
I don't think so.
it had a lot to do with Marines and sailors, because that's what, I was in the Navy. But so clam shelling, when someone would get out of control and we didn't want them to get arrested by the local police, because they were in a bar and, they'd start. So we would take the hard, rigid stretchers, they were big cages, basically, that had chicken wire. And anyway, so we'd handcuff the sides of them with a Marine or a sailor inside of it. And it's called clam shelling. And if they got out of line and they wanted to kick or spit at us, we just pick up one end of the stretcher and drop it, and it was a form of like, we'll call it a form of like torture on our own, like but that's what we were told to do, like, make them pay for what they were doing, and It was like, they're still just learning their ways. They're 19, 20 years old. They're acting like an idiot because they're intoxicated, whatever, for the first or second time in their life. And we were not nurturing that experience. We're not saying, hey, listen, man, I got you. Maybe you had a little bit too much. Let's chat about this. I remember giving people lactated ringers because they were hungover, right? So we give them an LR or some sort of saline, and we would sometimes, just because, I don't know, this is what we were told. If they act foolish, put it in their foot. That way, and so they have it, and they have to walk around with it, or they couldn't walk around at all. And then they would learn their lesson. And so it seemed like it was like kind of like this angry cycle of have fun, be sort of rewarded for it, sort of be punished for it, and then do it again. And until you really came home and you were actually able to decompress, is when you could actually, I don't know, have your normal life. Now I was in San Diego, which is only, a stone's throw from Tijuana. So that's where people would go on their liberty. So it never really ended. And so it seems like I never really had time to process. We call it debriefing, but we never had time to really process our deployment. I mean, it wasn't something that we did. You had a debriefing, which was very like professional, but we never had a mental, emotional state of debriefing of how we felt after shooting at people. It didn't really come to that emotional level. And I don't know if you had a different experience in the Army, but we didn't in the Navy at all.
I think with time it's gotten better. Like when I served, I came in 2002. So like right when like the global war on terrorism was like kicking off. And then pretty much my entire time was just like the op tempo or the operational tempo, like everything was just very, very very, very busy. When you weren't deployed, you were coming back and training to deploy. And so there wasn't a lot of like downtime, and that whole let's give people time to process their emotions and nurture is not really like part of military culture, right? I think it's like designed for that. But I think with so many different rotations and people coming back, you have AARs or after action reviews, and you start to see these certain patterns. And it is within the military's, own benefit to have readiness and soldiers that are like ready to deploy and that don't have mental health issues. So they would come up with all these, different programs to try to support the soldier and their families within like a whole holistic way, which is really cool to see it come out. At the same thing though, like because of the culture, no one's really going to go to those options. You know what I mean? It's kind of like we used to have like a single soldier like event or like a military family like events, mandatory fun events that they set up, but everyone just goes and we carry like flask in our pockets, you get drunk like before, during, and after. But yeah, like all of those things, even if they did exist, this culture still remained that you don't actually like get involved with that. And so even like, that's the thing that sucks. Like there's so many options now, I feel, as veterans, where people want to help and are out there to help. And we have lots of programs in place, but one, just knowing that those things are out there. And then two, for an individual to have the mindset that's going to be open to it. And a lot of times when it comes to like, healing crisis or transformation or anything like that, you typically aren't very preventative with it, right? You kind of wait until like you've hit the wall and you're like, in a very dark place, or you're like, about to like get there. I don't think a lot of times, within the culture, we allow ourselves to think that because, you get a little bit indoctrinated within the military and you have this idea of what a warrior mindset should be like. And I think because it's gotten so bad, that there are like, you know, really great initiatives coming like from the grassroots level of people trying to like say, hey, it's okay, you know, to have these kinds of things. But within the military, even if they still try to do that, it's such a disconnect from like what you need your mindset to be like to be able to deploy versus like, you know, and so a lot of times with this whole like psychedelic renaissance aspect, they're thinking like, well, how do we, you know, maybe can we use psychedelics for soldiers while they're in? So before they even get to these places, could it work? And I mean, that would be really great. But I think sometimes when you get your mind blown open in psychedelics and start to see like the oneness and the interconnectedness of it, it's not really the mindset that you want for soldiers going to war, right? Or going to different places to then start to think like, hey, we're all one. And, you know, because like there is this big sense of like otherness, as you're saying, like, you know, we're on this side, we're fighting for freedom. And you see these other groups of people like working contrary to that. So I don't know.
Are you familiar with the Bhagavad Gita? Are you familiar with
Yes.
that? Okay. So I want to chat about that a
Arjuna
little
was
bit.
a soldier. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to chat about that a little bit. So, you know, most of us, at least I didn't, I wasn't meditating when I was in. That was not part of my, my daily morning. Now it is, you know, to meditate, do breath work. And I think that's a really powerful tool that could be incorporated. I actually have a friend of mine, his name is Jesse, and he does a lot of work with the military and with police, first responders to teach meditation and breath work as a way to find space between what is thought and what is felt, and to kind of limit some of the reactions. You know, this podcast is about being an observer and saying, let's create some space. And, you know, the Bhagavad Gita starts off, you know, its beginning chapter is all about this giant battlefield north of Delhi. Arjuna is there and his charioteer, Krishna, is there. He's got his bow. He's ready to fight. He's ready to go in. And he takes a moment and realizes that he just can't fight. You know, I just can't do it, because he sees what he calls his kinsmen and his kid, you know, and I think it goes on a little bit deeper and says, you know, he sees some of his teachers and his uncles, but he looked at everybody on this battlefield, which, at least in my perception of how big this was, hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, it seems like it was a massive battle between two families who were fighting over land. You know, they were fighting over whose land is this going to be. And he said, I just can't fight. And, you know, those who want to read the Bhagavad Gita, go for it. It's an amazing read. You can read it in an afternoon, or you can do like me and read it over 10 years and try to figure out the different nuances of it and the different stories. But essentially, the story is, it's your dharma. You know, it's his dharma or his duty to do what he needs to do. And I always felt like that when I was in the military. I was like, whether I like it or not, this is my job and I need to go do that thing because it's what I'm being asked to do. But the difference is Krishna opened Arjuna's eyes to the way things are. He gave him these, you know, this spiritual sense of seeing that said, you can see who I am, which was God. You know, you can see this. And to me, I always look at that as sort of Krishna giving him, you know, some mushrooms or giving him something and saying, here, dude, open your eyes to the awakening. Here it is. And know that your dharma is your dharma, and this is it. And he was terrified at first until his eyes were open. He was terrified. And once his eyes opened, he says, I see that God is all around me and all this stuff. And so it kind of goes to what you were saying. It's like, I don't know if soldiers should get psychedelics, but I would tell you, in a therapeutic setting, at least my belief is, maybe having our eyes open to the way things are would not only help alleviate fear and possibly post-traumatic stress, but it could alleviate some of that fear that we have in the amygdala. Our amygdala says, I can't, I won't, when we realize we're just doing our duty. But on the other hand, we have to weigh it, right? We have to say, well, that could create psychosis. It could, you know, in some instances, you could have a, you know, soldier, a Marine, or a sailor or an airman who creates a psychosis with them and says, no, I gotta get out. I can't deal with this. And I don't know what the process would be to sort of filter that. I would say until it's FDA approved, that probably none. The only one that's FDA approved right now on a federal level is ketamine. And ketamine could be a way to open the spiritual eyes in a way that says, here, we'd like you to experience this and to kind of be a part. I'll tell you that I've had some pretty psychedelic experiences that had nothing to do with chemicals. I had it with fasting when I was deployed, where I just couldn't eat. We didn't have, the MREs weren't the greatest, and you had something here and there's something there, and I just didn't eat. And I had lack of sleep. I've had psychedelic experiences from lack of sleep. I've had psychedelic experiences in times of fear where I was feeling so much adrenaline in my body that it propelled me to what I would say is an altered state of consciousness. Did you have any of those altered states while you were in, but didn't know that that's what it was?
Oh, wow. Let me look back. So I was a little bit of a rebel, that idea of like, the military. I mean, I came in when I was 17, and so like, it's, what I grew up in. And there's always been some kind of part of me where it's like, okay, I'm going to do what I didn't do at work. And then you're saying like everyone goes offshore and like, parties and drinks. Well, I also was always very like curious about everything else. And so there was a lot of like recreational use of psychedelics at the time, definitely not the right setting. But I do feel like, my different altered states of consciousness, not even with like substances, but breath work actually is something that I found a lot of like very surprising like movement with. But during the military, a lot of it was just honestly like such a blur. And yeah, as I was kind of like hitting my wit's end at the very end, there were just definitely moments where I was very disembodied, and I wouldn't see these moments as like good altered states of consciousness, quote unquote good. But really it wasn't until I got out and I had like the freedom and the actual time and the willingness to lean in to try different things. And I think honestly, once I was able to actually experience like an intentional use of psychedelics and alternate states of consciousness, was like then the catalyst for like my body to know what it felt like. And then so when it came to like non-substances like breath work or things like that, where I could kind of just be able to tap in without the use of substances.
We find through some of our research that some of the most powerful altered states happen in the first couple times of doing it. So, if someone is a perpetual user of, whatever, if it's LSD or whatever, like their most profound breakthrough sessions happen to be usually in their first 3 to 4 sessions. Just tends to be, that's the way it is with ketamine, with psilocybin, with LSD. It just tends to be pretty profound in the first couple ones. And so as soldiers, sailors, they transition from the military, many of them are seeking organizations to help them with that. They've heard about it, they've thought about it, and then maybe they've even grown up in a place where it was sort of demonized, and then so they're feeling rebellious. I want to do this now. For at least for me, it was like, I'm going to grow my hair long, and I'm going to grow a beard, and I'm going to be rebellious now, and I'm going to do some psychedelics. So they seek out organizations like I know that there's a bunch of them that travel overseas to facilitate this because of the FDA not approving them currently. They're all still, a lot of them are still Schedule I substances. So they travel overseas to do it in different areas. And then there's a lot of folks like the organization you're involved with, the Visionary Veterans, who offer alternative medicines, which we can classify not necessarily as chemicals, but medicine can be an experience. And I think that's kind of what Visionary Veterans is doing. But can you talk about some of the organizations that propelled you along from going from active duty to veteran in that transition to mindfulness and consciousness and sort of learning your path? I know you've worked with several organizations, and now you're a founder of Visionary Veterans, but I want to start with like when you first got out and what kind of took you on that path.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I really love this subject because actually this past month I just hit my 5-year mark of when I got out. And so I've just been reflecting on, that long journey. And I think that there's like this quote that's, people overestimate what they can do like in a year and underestimate what they can do in like 5 years or 10 years. And, there was a lot of like in the beginning, a lot of regret about getting out so close, like 5 years to retirement. But I think, the amount that I've gained just mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, psycho spiritually, like within these past 5 years is just like, you know, if I would have just stayed in for that period of time, I would have never been able to experience all of these things. Right. And all these things I was able to experience came from different veteran organizations. And what I think is really interesting is they say, you know, like there's not a lot of help for veterans. And maybe, you know, through the government, through the VA, like those kinds of things, there's just such a big bureaucracy that like you can kind of get lost in the shuffle. But what I've seen really is a community of veterans that have like been through it and then started something to then help others. I think that like active service and fellowship and, you know, the brotherhood or sisterhood that you have in the military doesn't die once you get out of service. And so my very first thing I did when I got out, I was actually still like on my transition leave, is I got my 200-hour yoga teacher training through a veteran organization called Vet Toga, so like veteran in yoga, started by Marine. And one of the things I also really liked was finding organizations that were started by actual veterans and not by like a civilian trying to help a veteran. There's something about that nuance of like, here's someone who's gone through it, coming back to save, like help others along the way, than like, here's someone who doesn't maybe understand the nuances as much. You know, it's like very well-meaning, it's super appreciated, but there is something great about having someone who gets it and then maybe can have like, you know, the jargon and like the references and just that kind of thing. And so started by Marine, Justin, and he had gone through like Sri Dharma Mitra's program, and then worked with him to come up with an individualized sequence that could be used for any veteran. And it was really great. The iteration that I went through also included like Yin and Yoga Nidra and Ayurveda and just like a whole buffet of all these different kinds. And it was just, I mean, it was really great. I had been practicing yoga even while I was in the military. And, you know, I was kind of into mindfulness and some of those things to just try to help with like regulating throughout. But I really wanted to be able to deepen my practice. And I got that opportunity through Fatoga, and then having your 200-hour then gave me the ability to, one, give back to my local community because I still stayed in the Fort Bragg area. And then two, it gave me the opportunity to have like a baseline so that I could get specialty like certifications and things I was really interested in. So after that, not a veteran organization, but I got certified in Y12SR, which is Yoga for 12-Step Recovery, started by Nikki Myers. And it really helped for me to see like because as I had finished rehab and had learned all these different things, I was also thinking like, oh, some of these things they're mentioning sounds like something I had heard in yoga or something that I had heard in like mindfulness. And I think it's interesting that a lot of things that are given in a scientific form or a newer, like, you know, here's a book or a technique, all kind of can get traced back to like something more ancient. And so it's like you start to see these patterns and things. And so the first thing I did was got my 200-hour. Also along that time period, I got a scholarship through the David Lynch Foundation. He's a transcendental meditation practitioner and director that started a scholarship. And because I had, you know, a medical discharge and like all these like, you know, depression, these kinds of things, I was able to get the technique for free. And so it was great to be able to like also have that meditation piece along with my yoga. And then a couple months later, I did a program called the Warrior Scholar Project, which helps. It's also started by a Marine, female vet, and it helps service members kind of like learn how to get into higher education if they wanted to. So I went to this Harvard MIT program, and it's kind of like a boot camp because they say like, you know, service members have all these different skills, but maybe like aren't as up to date on like study skills and all these different things from the military. So it helps to seat them in, and they work with other organizations to help people if you want to get into higher learning. Because, you know, you first get out and you're like, oh, I have my GI Bill. Maybe I should get into like, you know, a school and work on a degree and all of these things. What I learned from that program was that like I was not in any place to be able to like start going to school. Like I was so dysregulated. Like if, you know, because you go to these veteran groups and everyone's just like, oh, what's your story? And I had just gotten out and I still, you know, like was trying to deal with all of these different things. And it's kind of hard to just be like, oh, I was medically retired, you know, and say all of these, you know, and it was very recent. So I was just like that girl crying in the bathroom. Like I couldn't write, I couldn't like really pay attention. And even though it was a great program, it was great for me to learn that like maybe this isn't the path for me. Another veteran organization I did like the year after was called the Boulder Crest Retreat. Now I think it's known as Boulder Crest Initiative. And what I really liked about that organization is that they were all about post-traumatic growth. So it wasn't like, oh, let's, you know, let's talk about all the things that like, you know, went wrong with you, but like, let's give you tools and practices. And one of their bedrocks is transcendental meditation as well. And what was interesting was, and they give it to you for free, and it's an amazingly well done and executed program, very well funded. They've like reached out now to like have all these satellite programs across the nation. But the woman who taught transcendental meditation for that group was my original TM teacher.
Oh,
and
wow.
So that, yeah, it was great. So it ended up being this like renewal into the practice, because I had it, but I wasn't really practicing that much. And so, I mean, after having, you know, like yoga teacher training and different like life experiences and just like, you know, really delving more into like my yoga practice, having that like reintroduction of the transcendental meditation technique and having a community now of like doing that, like really, really was like a catalyst for just my own ownership and devotion to like what a meditation practice can give you. And this retreat I went to was literally January of 2020. So then the pandemic happened and there's not much to do. Well, what do? Well, I meditated and yeah, and it was really great because I had this community to do it with. And yeah, like we talk about like altered states of consciousness, this ability to be able to just tap in was just, yeah, it was amazing. And
are
then,
you
you know,
familiar with are you familiar with SN Goenka?
Yes, I want to do a Vipassana so bad.
Okay. Well, the reason why I bring it up is because there was this there was a documentary that was done, and it's, you can find it on YouTube now, and it's called Doing Time Doing Vipassana, and it's basically when SN Goenka, when he went to India, you know, he's a forest monk, you know, so he came from over, I believe, in Cambodia maybe, or Vietnam. I'm not forget where he's from exactly, but he came, maybe Laos, one of those Southeast Asian countries. But he came to India to teach this, and he taught it in the prisons in Delhi. And it's basically, this documentary is about him starting with, all they would do is like 10 people at first, because these are like really, I mean, lifetime criminals, you know. So they're teaching it, and they found some pretty good results. And then they expanded it to where they had, I forget the number, at one point they had like 1,000 inmates in tents doing Vipassana at one point, and you know, with very few guards. I mean, and it was really an interesting thing. And it makes me think like, well, couldn't Vipassana, couldn't meditation, couldn't TM be taught to servicemen, you know, as part of, you know, that, like, I really think that it would be a beneficial thing, even though we're not, you know, we talked about, you know, psychedelics, but altered states of consciousness, and meditation to me really fits into that if you're done right. Couldn't that be a way, just like, you know, just like Arjuna did, goes into a meditative state before battle, and that was really what he did, you know. And so if that was a top practice, which I know that many militaries around the world do, you know, if you think about, you know, the samurai warrior, you know, back, you know, meditation, we even talk, you know, there's many, I would even say that even, you know, many countries who are established militaries have meditation as a practice. And I would love to see that. We're not here to talk about how that would actually happen, but maybe, you know, if some of the larger, more dominant militaries of the world offer that, maybe we would be less likely to deploy unnecessarily sometimes, because we're creating some space between what is thought and what is felt. We do a lot of reacting, and we do a lot of things that have to do with logic rather than our hearts. rather than our thinking mind. You know,
Right.
we just think about it. We have to finish this. We have to do this, but our hearts say something different. You know,
Right.
and
That ability
I would
to
love to see.
connect
I
the
would love to
head
see
to
that.
the heart.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's what I felt like TM was able to give me. And also that Boulder Crest post-traumatic growth program was to be able to start to connect and close the distance between the head and the heart, you know, and to be able to like see a mindful movement happen within the military. I mean, it is happening. I think one of the things is, you know, it's a government program, right, in the military. So you can't use certain terms that feel too, you know, within one culture or religion or whatnot. So you kind of have to be able to like sanitize it. And so I remember one of the terms that I would use, because I would actually teach back at like Swaker, the Special Warfare Center in school, to like people going through the course. And I would just have to learn how to change the wording to something that would make sense for them. And so something that I had learned was a tactical pause, right?
Okay.
Like before you go,
love it.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's before you go out and like do something, like, you know, you take a tactical pause, you kind of check in with your body, you take a breath. And, you know, for military members who are still very much so in a certain mindset, if you start to talk to them about like mindfulness and things like that, sometimes unless they get it, they're going to kind of be like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever. Like, how does this actually help me? But you're just putting those little terminology like tidbits in it helps.
Well, you know, we have chapels and we have, you know, chaplains in the military that are offering prayer. You know, you know, it would be. I remember being on some small boats, very small boats, where you know the chapel was the size of my van. You know, and you could fit 2 people in there. But then being on some larger boats, like on some aircraft carriers that had space for worship and for religion on the boat. And I mean, I think that, you know, different programs, maybe that's something that, you know, maybe visionary veterans can even look into, you know, is saying, hey, how can we help active servicemen who are transitioning?
Yes.
So I know visionary veterans have, you know, including yourself, your husband, even like we have some people who participate in visionary veterans who are in the transition as they came to some of the events. And maybe that's a place for that early integration. Now, I know that you talked about head and heart connection. I know you've done some stuff to give back that has to do with your heart. And I kind of wanted to hear a little bit about that, because it's something that I didn't know about you until I started to kind of research what you were doing about with the Waves for Water. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So Waves for Water. Can you tell me a little bit about that? So that's really a giving back as a veteran to other communities. And I'd love for our audience to hear that.
Oh, it's an organization I love so incredibly much. So as I was going through, one of the jobs I had in the military was civil affairs. And as I was going through the qualification course for that, one of my buddies, his name is Rob McQueen, he went through the course and he was got stationed in the European sector. I was in the Africa sector, but he was on, and so I kind of call civil affairs, it's hard to try to explain, but I would say like strategic humanitarianism, like you're working with building capacity and of like your local like partner nation. So not just the military, but also finding like civilian counterparts that can help within like a certain objective. And a lot of it, sorry, my voice is going. So he was working with a civilian nonprofit organization to help bring water access to different areas in his area of operations where people didn't have it. And a lot of times people think in the military, you know, it's just very like, you know, major war efforts, you know, phase 5 kinds of things. But a lot of it is preventative. And that's why I liked my old job, was that like, you know, a lot of maligned actors or like violent extremist organizations take advantage of poor non-governed areas to then recruit or get access to other places. So if we can get into those areas and help, you know, strengthen them, connect them to the government, kind of like the head and the heart thing, then you're building resilience within a community and they won't be so susceptible to these like bad actors. And so, you know, basic things like clean water. So he worked with this organization started by John Rose. He was a surfer. And the name of the organization was Waves for Water. And what I loved about it was quick impact. Like a lot of water projects I've seen, you know, working through like aid and large scale things is multi-million-dollar, like large scale kind of projects. that if one thing goes wrong, maybe you can't get a mechanic in there, or, you know, like it's very high tech. So to have something with just like very simple buckets that you can, like a 5-gallon bucket that you can hand drill a hole in, and then just bring like a small like piece of filter to introduce it into a system, you're providing something that can help, maybe not long term, like over like, you know, generations, but that one filter can last for like 10 years if cleaned properly, for up to 10 families. And so it's really amazing at the capacity of like one little thing. And so this surfer had one with him, and I think he was somewhere in like the Pacific and was on a surfing trip. They're out on the water when like a typhoon or hurricane, something hit, and the people on the ground like didn't have, like, they were just kind of going crazy. Like, you know, like there was just, it's a catastrophe. And he was able to then come back onto the land, bring that filter, and provide access for this community to have clean drinking water, for some of the medical providers to be able to like sanitize some of their like supplies. And from there, he was like, oh, wow, like this small impact can actually, you know, really help out in an area. So he started a courier project where people could just, you know, say, hey, I'm going to this area, let me buy a bunch of filters, then I can help procure, you know, a bucket. It's like universal. So you can find that within the local economy, and it's easier to travel with. And then Rob, being, you know, just the great entrepreneur that he is, connecting the dots, he was like, you know, I feel like our job within like civil affairs and just like military members, like we could really help out with this organization. So he started Clean Water Corps, which is the Veterans Division of Ways for Water. And the whole thing is like, well, the Ways for Water slogan is do what you love and help along the way. So, you know, it'd be a bunch of surfers that are going around, and they would just bring water filters with them. It's expanded since then to help with like disaster relief. And then with like Rob and the Clean Water Corps, we've been able to help bring in different veterans with skill sets that still want to be able to serve. And the whole thing is, and I love this, is that this concept of like veterans aren't victims, right? That you can still serve after service. And I think within the veteran community, everyone's trying to help each other, but there is this kind of like underlying idea that it's like, oh, we're like these broken people that need all these like skill sets and help, versus like this very empowering, like, hey, you've learned all of these different varying like intangible skills that could help you within like a disaster relief area. So that's something that I've been able to do for the past 5 years since I've gotten out. So I've been able to go to Costa Rica, Navajo Nation, and then most recently I just got back from Turkey, helping with the earthquake survivors in that area. And it's just something that, even though I was still very lost and feeling very untethered, made me feel like I had this purpose to be able to give back, you know? And yeah, service is just one of my core values that no matter what is always really important to me. So whether it's working on a larger scale with like, you know, humanitarian efforts, or it's working within a community for like, you know, meditation or yoga, or doing retreats with visionary veterans, yeah, I just feel that my service isn't going to stop with my military service. And that because I've gone through all of these different various things, it actually helps me to be able to have more compassion, empathy, and understand where people are coming from.
It takes time to learn that. I mean, it takes, you know, it's not something you can just learn in a transition assistance program, right? You can't just take your taps and then you're out, and then you realize that your mission is to be of service. At least for me, I felt that I needed to be in medicine when I got out, because that was my only purpose in life, because that's what I had learned when I was a teenager. I got out, you know, and then I was like, now what? Now what do I do to be of service? And I had to like, at least at the time, I was like, I have to reinvent myself. But really, that was just my path. My path was to start, serve, and then learn some more. And I've reinvented myself, I don't know, 5 times, I think, since my, you know, different jobs and careers. And we learned that our path is not always a straight line. Now,
oh, for sure.
And it has pauses, and our journey is not A to B, easy through our life, and we learn to be of service. And I mean, that's fantastic. I had somebody on a podcast, maybe about 40 episodes ago, and they sell those water machines, that have the alkaline water machines, they plug them in, and they're a couple grand for these water machines, right? And they're cool. I mean, it's great, and I think that they have benefit to humanity. But one of the questions I asked her, I said, well, that's great, but what about places who can't afford a couple $1,000 water machines?
Right.
So people who have to hike in miles with water buckets on their head from a clean water source, just, I said, what about those people who really need just clean water? Let's talk about that, because that, for me, oh, there you are drinking. I see you drinking your water bottle from Waves for Water. But then that was kind of my concern. Was that's great, these machines, I believe that they're an amazing thing, but what about someone who doesn't even have two pennies to rub together and needs clean water? I don't think that is something that we should have as the benefit of, living in a first world nation. I think that all people have the right to clean water. And I love that you're giving back in that way, because that is really the work that I think will help us create allies and have less war. Honestly, I mean, what else? I mean, something that you can do is saying, hey, no, these military veterans, or these Americans, we'll just label it as it is, are coming in here and giving us water. We don't hate them as much as we used to. Before it was, we hate your concept, we hate your kind, we don't like that you have money, and you're always pushing your agenda on us, and who you are. We're here to serve you, and we hope that we can, I mean, I'll go on a more spiritual sense, but like kind of pushing out the Gandhi message, that Mahatma Gandhi was asked what his message to the world was, and he said, my life is my message. And I would love the military complex to say, this is our message, not our message of how much we can spend on dropping bombs, not how massive our ships are, but I had a conversation with my brother. My brother's in the Air Force. He's an A-10 pilot.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yep. Wow. My brother's an A-10 pilot, and he's stationed. Well, he was in Georgia, and now he's down in Tucson. And he was telling me about dropping bombs over the Nevada test site. I think he had his whole squadron there, and the bombs were somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 million a piece, something like that. And there was 18 of them in the squadron, and they did, I don't know, 10 sorties in a weekend or something. And I said, do the math on that really quick. Just do the math on how much ammunition you dropped on the naval test site, which is not only making that area a radioactive zone. No one can live there. I mean, there's not much there anyway. Let's just be real. So, the Nevada test site is pretty barren land. Area 51's out there, and there's some other, areas that are there, but essentially it's just scattered, and you can't fly over it. You can't drive through it. But think about the money that is spent on doing that. What if we were to take even just half of that and apply that to, I don't know, homelessness, hunger, water, just aid in general? And I know that during one of my times, one of my deployments was to Somalia, and the Red Cross was quite predominant in that relief. They were offering food and offering water, and they were offering different forms of aid. But the terrorists, that's what we call them, which is what we were told to call them, we're taking that food and water and basically holding it hostage for the people. And so that's where the military became involved. So we're supporting the Red Cross,
right,
in that way. But I would love to see that it was actually the military offering the aid rather than a third party organization. So maybe one day that'll be us dropping food and water rather than dropping bombs. That would be amazing and wonderful.
Well, we do that though. We actually do that.
Talk about it.
We do. Yeah. Like we do drop food and water and all of these different things in different organizations, like working through different nonprofits or just through the military itself. It's just like those things don't get really brought up as much because it's not as sensational. And that's why with my last job, I mean, it was really hard for me because I was very I was sold on the messaging of what I thought like this job could do, right? Within the military, I think most people that join, it's like this idea of like freedom and serving your nation and spreading like the ideals of democracy to different places. And then you start to see like how that idea versus like on the ground is a little different. And I was very bought in, sold, and passionate about my most recent job in the military when I was a medic with civil affairs, because that's what we would do. We would go into different areas and we would find, first of all, just like, what are the actual issues? And that idea of like, okay, we're Americans, or that white savior kind of like, here, let us like push our agenda on you. Like, it was actually like taught to us in school, like, you don't want to be the ugly American. Actually listen to your partners, find out what the issues are, and then see how you can like fit in. And so that's what I love about even working with like Waste for Water and Clean Water Corps. We apply those kinds of like the humanitarian like ethics of, you have, even with like coaching, right? You have to meet people where they're at. You don't just say like, hey, let me just give you these tools that you're not asking for. And so we would do that in our old jobs. And as like a medic, I would help to train like other medics. I would also help to train different militaries on like, hey, this is actually how you like win over the civilian populace. And these are like the ethics of like warfare. There's so much that the military does in a humanitarian sense, like you were saying, like helping to provide security for different nonprofits, to be able to provide aid to areas that maybe don't have the opportunity to get it. And so, I mean, throughout Africa, I was able to help bring like malaria medications to underserved, undergoverned areas, and actually find hospitals that needed certain kinds of equipment or certain kinds of training to be able to connect those dots. And what I thought was really great about doing that kind of work within the military, that I didn't realize it until I got out, was you actually feel super supported. Like when you're conducting a mission while you're in the military, there's something that in the back of your head is that like you have the might of the military, like the greatest, strongest, most well-funded military like behind you. And if something happens, like you're gonna be protected. And I think when you get out of the military, you start to realize that that's not really there anymore, and that you have to then kind of cultivate your own community and your own like self-sovereignness and your own connection to something beyond that maybe you didn't even realize that you were getting from the military. Because everyone talks about, the military is like very hard, and it is, but the other sense, like you are super supported. Like, they provide housing, they provide medical care. Like if you don't show up, someone's looking for you, like all of these like things. And also for readiness, it's like, hey, they're like your mom, right? Like, hey, did you get your teeth checked? Hey, did you like
it's true.
get this done? Like, oh, is your you get like, if you're going on Liberty or a pass, like they're going to check your car to see like, are your brakes okay? Like, are your tire wheels right? All of these things that you kind of take for granted. And then once you're out of the military, you're like, oh, how do I actually adult when someone isn't there to, one, provide a system that checks up on it. But also like, I talked about the idea of like rebelling, right? Like, what do you rebel against when that is gone? And so I noticed that I was kind of like rebelling against myself, right? And then trying to like learn all these different behaviors and patterns that like were self-sabotaging. And just, like, I think the transition out of the military can be very hard, and especially for people that have medically retired, because you've got a whole other like paradigm of things to deal with. But the great thing about it is I think that you have the opportunity, like, right? Like as someone who got out because they had to, because the military was like, sorry, no thanks. Part of the outboarding process was going through all the VA disability things. So all of those things were done for me. There was a checkup kind of like gates to have these procedures or to have these appointments done, versus if you just get out of the military, then it's on you to like have the onus to make these appointments. So as hard as it is, it actually is beneficial for you in the long term, because then you're out and you're actually set up, you've done all the things, and then you've identified what the issues are.
I know you talked about, the military as being a community, and it still is. And that's kind of why, some of the veteran organizations that are veteran owned and run are so powerful. You talk about the jargon, that's a piece of it. That just says that we understand each other. Another piece of it is that, the stories around the campfire sometimes that say, yeah, I've been there too. And a lot of it is just a mindset. I find that the veterans that I speak to, we get along because we understand what it was like to be young and married and deployed. We're like, yeah, I get it that's hard. And, I get it, what it was like to be, what felt like a million miles away from home at 20 years old and see nothing but sea around you and aircraft taking off 24 hours a day. And then being asked to respond to a plane crash, and you're like, wow, there's just so much happening, and drills that happen all day long and all that kind of stuff. And, the fire drills and poison drills and airplane crash drills. And we had one called, I'm not going to say what it's called, but basically it was a terrorist on board the ship drill, and all these things that you do. And to have that community is really important. And so I just know that you came back from an event recently that I would like to hear about with Visionary Veterans, where it was about building community and learning earth skills and learning about the just things that are fun to learn about, but also create a sense of community. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing with Visionary Veterans? And I know we have several events coming up, but also that earth skills gathering, which sounds just fantastic. I wish I could have made it, but.
Well, there'll definitely be more. And also after that, it was my very first Earth Skills as well, caveat, and learning that there's actually very similar events like that throughout at least the East Coast that I know of. And so I'm actually very interested to hear and learn about other Earth Skill like events happening throughout the country so that we can try to have a plug for veterans that maybe can't make it all the way out to Florida. But so Earth Skills is or I don't want to call it a retreat, but like an event in North Florida that Veronica, the other co-founder of Visionary Veterans, our mutual friend, she's been going to for like the past 6 or 7 years. And she, goes to a lot of different events and retreats and festivals. And she's always been telling me about Earth Skills and how it's like her favorite one because she leaves feeling so empowered, right? And there's like this connection of nature. And when we actually got together, we showed up to the Hospital Forest for our last Visionary Veterans retreat last November, a couple days early to just, touch base. And the very first night, Veronica and I stayed up, way too late, just, getting caught up and super excited and sharing our visions and, what we feel like the paradigm is like. And I was telling her, especially when I was doing some work in Navajo Nation, working with indigenous folks that are just like, that land is so barren, it's beautiful, but it's a hard life. And, we're working with these buckets and everything can be done by hand for these like water projects. But, if you want to make it a little quicker, we use the drill bit, put it into a drill. And, we would make our holes for the filters that way. But our battery died and we had to just do it by hand. And I remember there was a bunch of us veterans making holes by hands. And then we were working through the Johns Hopkins Center for American Indian Health, and they're working for maternal care. So a lot of these locals also making the holes, and they were like done so quickly. And I remember I was like, man, my fingers hurt. I was like, this is kind of hard. And one of the guys with us was just like, yeah, they're built tougher out here. We're just kind of like soft. And I think it's a funny thing because you think military veterans, we're like these warrior culture that we're so tough, but actually just we've kind of been coddled. And so
we live in a lot of comfort for sure. Even in the military, you may complain about the food, you may complain about the barracks, but let's just, for the most part, it has air conditioning, it has running water, it has places. I remember being in Bahrain, in the Persian Gulf, on this little marine base on Bahrain, and there was pizza and there was movie theater. And here I am off the coast of Saudi Arabia, just south of Iraq and Kuwait. in this place where we're playing, shooting pool and drinking beer, and we had lots of comforts, lots of comforts where,
So
you know,
many.
living in the desert, which is something I'm very familiar with now, living in the desert, it does create some challenges, but we learn to I always say that the transformation happens within discomfort. And
Yes.
and that is true for my life and for many others, is when you're in a place of discomfort, you figure it out, you make it work, you have less to complain about because you're so grateful for the little that you have. And I think that's a really important concept as we do that. So I know that you were doing the Erstil's gathering, which, by the way, it came from the hostel. That's something, I mean, it was kind of cool. You know, we were at the hostel in the forest. Those who don't know, the Visionary Veterans does a retreat there, and we're planning one very soon. We'll be announcing that. But the hostel in the forest is a place in Georgia, and it is a permaculture swamp. And it is a permaculture swamp that has so much goodness and love. And I love being part of the forest
It's
fam.
magical.
It is a magical place that, used to be kept quite secret, and now it's not as secret anymore, but it used to be very much a secret, where you had to know somebody to get in, and you had to kind of be invited, and you had to pay your membership dues. And now there's retreats that happen there. So kind of a cool concept.
As we're preparing for the retreat, I was talking to Veronica about different ideas for the way forward for different retreat and gatherings and ways to create community. And I was telling her, just like the coddling of the American mind, and how we've become a little softer, and how I really wanted to get something where we had tangible skills and these ideas of permaculture and getting close to the environment and just survival skills and all of these kinds of ideas. And she was like, that's Earth skills. Mm-hmm. And so we're like, how do we combine Visionary Veterans and Earth skills? And she was like, oh, I'll just call them and see if we can get a veterans camp started there. And so the idea was actually made from the hostel in the forest that first night of that last retreat. And then, a couple months later, we were able to execute on that vision. I think it was in February. And so we had our first veterans trip out there. And it was great because it was all ladies and females. And so it was very empowering. You get to camp out. There's nightly fires and opening circles and music. And it was just such a really cool intersection because you could have Southerners that, are just the Florida, kind of hillbilly type of idea that people you would think would it really be into this, but actually it makes sense because they're from that area, or not calling people from that area hillbillies.
No, but I mean, it's definitely, there's definitely a primitive backwoods mentality in parts of Florida that a lot of people don't understand. They think of it as Disney and Miami, but really the northern part of Florida is really southern Georgia. Let's just be real. They just create the border differently. Exactly. So it's southern Georgia, those who know the land, who like to be out in it, who, are fishing farms. And yep. And it's just different. And people don't think of Florida as that. They think of it as beaches and theme parks. And really a lot of it, at least for me, when I was living in Florida, my best times were spent not at the beaches or theme parks. They were spent at the springs and in places like the hostel in the forest. And that's really where I found the most joy while living there, was in those spaces. So it's definitely a magical place that I hope never goes underwater. But
but yeah, this idea that you could get, hippies and preppers and all of these different kinds of communities together that you wouldn't think would not typically want to be together, but everyone needs to learn how to live off of the land and better, more sustainable ways to do it. So it was just super cool to see all these different intersections of groups come together. And, they had a men's camp there where it was actually men could just come and gather, actually be able to talk about their feelings with one another. We had a red tent there where women could come and rest. And the first aid tent was all herbal use. And yeah, it was just really cool. And I could see a lot of overlapping intersection with the military survival, veteran kinds of skills that we have gotten through the military, or just are interested in harnessing and developing further as we get out.
So that was one event, which is amazing. It's fantastic. And I know that, I mean, there's some online courses that are happening on visionaryveterans.org now. In addition to that, a couple of retreats that are coming up. You want to talk about those retreats and how people can find them? Because I can tell you that even after being out so long, you found it really quick and early. For me, when I got out of it in 2005 after 10 years, and I didn't find the resources that I was looking for, so I went in 1995, got out 2005, and Visionary Veterans is trying to create this alternative healing modalities and really accomplishing it, but in the way of retreats and in the way of community and the way of just even monthly gatherings to talk about things, just to get together. But I'd like to hear about some of the retreats you're doing. One of them, I guess, we're going to do with me, which is pretty cool out here in southern Utah. We can chat about that. But veterans, especially those who have been familiar with the VA, are used to receiving care from the VA. And when and some of the resistance that we found is some of these events, they cost money to put on. They cost a little bit to put on. So I'm going to emphasize this for you and for the Visionary Veterans is you're certainly looking for people who want to donate, to give grants, who are interested in helping other veterans find these healing modalities through retreats and through what we're calling a ketamine retreat, because as a ketamine therapist here in Utah, we need to bring people out, and it costs several $1,000s per person to do that. So those who are looking, you can reach out to the info at visionaryveterans.org. Is that correct? Is it info?
Info at visionarywets.org.
Visionarywets.org. Okay. So info at visionarywets.org. If you're interested in that, that's a great place to go, because we are certainly doing outreach now for grant writing, and any veterans who want to get involved in this, who have said, hey, I'm interested in some of the things that are happening, but I don't think that I need to go overseas to get it. I think I can actually find it here in the United States, doing the stuff with cool people who are doing earth skills gatherings and ketamine journeys and offering art retreats. Can you just briefly talk about some of the retreats that you have planned and maybe ways people can get involved or where they can look for all that information?
Yes. So we have 2 retreats planned for the fall of this year. The first one being with you in South Utah, right outside Zion. We are looking at the dates of 11 through 15 October, which we're super excited about because it's right around a new moon, and we know that area is great for like night sky viewing.
It's dark.
So we wanted to make sure, we could get like the darkest of the dark time periods as well. And you'll be providing the ketamine assisted therapy and breath work, and Veronica will be there providing art, integration, space holding. I won't actually be able to attend any of the fall retreats for us this year because my first child will be due right in the middle of both of those retreats. So not a lot of traveling for me. But yeah, we're really excited about this first ketamine retreat because one of the things that we want to be able to do with Visionary Veterans is to show like alternative treatment modalities outside of, the VA and typical pharmaceuticals and things like that. And we really do believe in like the healing power of like psychedelics and plant medicine. But, ketamine is the only thing that's FDA approved right now. So it's the only thing that we can do within the states legally. And to be able to go outside of the states, there's actually a lot of really great veteran organizations that are already doing that. They've helped me do that. And so like, why try to recreate the wheel of other people doing that? I also believe that, what I love about you being able to provide this feature is that once again, it's a veteran led thing. It's not, another civilian or outsourced to somewhere else, but it's coming from someone who's been through all of it. And I think that really is empowering to see like the full circle, right? And so one of the things we want to try to do as well is just try to find other veterans that have, gone through their journeys and want to give back in some sort of capacity. So that's one of the things we're doing with our online classes. We're very against the whole idea of like, as much as we know everyone needs healing, this concept of like veterans as victims, as these like, poor, broken soldier or, service members isn't really a narrative that we want to continue to, put out there. Like, yeah, you've gone through some things and it's really hard, but you have a community, and we want to try to find a way to help empower them. And so rather than just asking for donations, as we're always asking for donations because these things, you know, we're a nonprofit and it helps, but we also want to be able to have like a win-win situation where we could provide a service in return for a donation. So that's where the online classes come in. And so it's actually a platform for veterans to be able to give back, to showcase what they, you know, have learned, and have, you know, greater distribution. But if there's civilians that also want to help out with classes, you know, we could just take that as a donation. But for the veterans giving classes, we believe like in also financial empowerment as part of like a holistic healing modality, because, you know, in this physical world, like you also need to be able to be like financially empowered. So if a veteran is wanting to donate a class, we were going to just split the course 50-50. So even like, and so when we talk about holistic classes, you know, not just about like healing modalities, but just like life skills, right? So if someone wants to like give a class about this is how you get your money right, this is how you work on your resume, or any of those kinds of things, you know, that's all part of a holistic process.
So yeah, I think we figured there was like about $1,000 a veteran to come to a retreat. Isn't that what we kind of said about that? And
that's on the cheap end.
That's on the that's on the low end.
Yeah.
So we would say that, you know, that's about what it is. But it, you know, depending on where the location is, depending on travel, depending on how they're getting there, but about that is what it costs. So you can imagine if we're having a retreat of 20 veterans, what it takes to put that on, and especially if they're traveling from all over the country. And you know, so definitely your support is needed. I think the best way to tune into that is the Instagram page for Visionary Veterans. I think that's probably the best way to get the most and fast information about what's going on, what's needed, what the agenda is, what the calendar is. And I know that there's some pretty cool stuff happening on the page there for Visionary Veterans on Instagram, and that's where I would say to go look. But you can also through there get on the newsletter, which is a monthly newsletter that is another really great resource in Instagram, social media. Getting on the newsletter through the Visionary Veterans website, you can just kind of link in there, and then you'll get added to the monthly newsletter. Oops.
And then the second retreat we have planned is about a month later, set around Veterans Day, so 11/11. So the dates that we have to surround that would be the 9th through the 13th of November. And this will be back at the hostel in the forest. And once again, it's our holistic buffet is one of the ways that we described it, of just an introduction to all the different types of modalities available. So we're also looking for not only participants and sponsors, but if there is someone that, you know, has an offering that they're willing to share, also looking for that as well. Once again, I won't be able to be there, but I know that you're going to take over the yoga as well as the breath work and the ice bath, and Veronica will be there for the art integration and the sweat lodge, which is just, you know, one of my favorite parts of our retreats.
So yeah, I want to emphasize what you just said there. If anybody has anything they want to offer, I mean, it could be sound healing, it could be poetry, it could be I like to cook. Anybody who is interested in being a part of that, of offering something, we are certainly open and welcoming all suggestions of ways that you think you could give back, because this is sort of, in a way, it's earth skills. This is us teaching earth skills, but also mind skills, which is life skills, which is using this beautiful place called the hostel in the forest, which has been there for me in many ways. And you get the chance to be a part of it all in this beautiful, you know, I think what 50 acres, I think is what they're at, 54 acres, something like that now, and near Brunswick, Georgia. So that's where that one will be in over Veterans Day, which I'm super stoked about. I think we need to, I would love to bring in like a veterans like band, you know, the guys who play like
yes,
I would love. So one time we did an event there, and all of a sudden these guys who were like poets and they had a DJ, they all of a sudden showed up, and this wasn't for a veteran event was for another one, and we let them just play. They played in this little area we call the pool, even though there's not a pool. There used to be. So they played there, and it would be really cool to have some live music. We do stuff by the fire, but it would be kind of cool to bring in. I know we've had a few of them where we've had live people who just show up. So magic happens in the forest. But yeah, if you're interested in being a part, going to visionaryveterans.org is a good place to get started. So there's all kinds of things that can be done and offered. And Crystal, I'm really grateful that you took time today to chat with me and tell me a little bit of your story, because we've done a few events together, but I didn't know your complete story. And it's good for us to get to know each other in that way, just as friends and also as co-founders of this beautiful organization. So, I guess I won't be able to see you this year at any of these events. So this is my one time on Zoom here, but hopefully we'll have a few other little events. And then afterward, you'll have a little one, maybe a little one in training at the events. We'll see. So.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. Thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah, I think it's really important to share our stories so that people don't feel alone, but also the representation of knowing that not this cookie cutter narrative of veterans doesn't exist. There's a bunch of weird, artistic, spiritual seekers, entrepreneurial, service oriented, this idea of a seva or a siva, sangha, right? These people that want to give back, and this empowered sense of really changing the narrative and honoring something sacred. Because I've done lots of different veteran retreats and been part of lots of different veteran organizations, and I love them. But what we're really trying to co-create here is something that doesn't exist yet, so to kind of find the misfits and the idea of let's make something special that everyone feels that they're all included. So this Visionary Veterans isn't just for post 9/11 veterans. It isn't just for people with combat on their DD-214s. It's for anyone that really when we say warrior spirit, that's what we mean. Someone who is willing to raise their hand and say send me, and even that's outside of veterans, right? So we've had lots of first responders. And I think that it's important that what we're trying to do with Visionary Veterans isn't just to help other veterans, but it's to create a platform and a narrative for it's the veterans that are providing the service. And I think that's what's really different about this. And so another plug is that Veronica and I, this is the one event that I will be able to attend. It's going to be next month in June. We're going to be in Denver, Colorado. Super excited to be part of the Psychedelic Science Convention or Conference. We're going to be a community partner there. So we're going to have a booth up, and we're just super excited to be one of the veteran groups there, but also to kind of represent for female veterans founded organizations, and hopefully make some really good connections there and see what we can help co-create and bring forward for the future as well.
Are you going to have a table there or a booth, or how is that working at Psychedelic? Okay, so look for them. I wish I could get there. Honestly, I'm going to be at the Divine Assembly Summer Revival at that same time, speaking and doing breath work. So if you can't get to Colorado, up in Boulder, for the Psychedelic Science Conference, if you're in Utah, then you can certainly come by and do breath work with me up in Eden, Utah that same weekend. But I think we're going to be looking at maybe doing the Psychedelic Science Conference also in LA, and maybe I can make that one.
Around.
Yeah, if I can make that one, I will. But definitely just come by and say hello, get a sticker. I know there's some really cool stickers that we're passing out. As I was looking, the listeners won't be able to see this, but up in the corner here, can you see this right here?
I do.
So I have I'm pointing to a sticker that's from the Hostel in the Forest, and it says, "May the forest be with you." And it's kind of a play on the Star Wars theme, but "May the forest be with you" kind of is more than the play on words. I think it's really something, that spirit that we carry with us always. And once you've attended the forest, it's always kind of with you. It's like this shift that happens from having barefoot by the fire and everyone connecting over a gratitude circle. And then maybe you've attended an event like a Psychedelic Science Conference, or maybe you've been to Earth Skills Gathering, but the forest is kind of always with you. Kind of just being a veteran is always with you. And there's something that just can't be taken away. And I think that's the message I truly believe in is like, no matter how much I evolve as a human, as much as I evolve spiritually, I'm always, I started my journey as a veteran, you know, as a serviceman and then as a veteran. And that is always part of my story that I don't want to shake, even though there was some shame, you know, in parts of it. Yes. And there was some like unknowns, and there was some heartbreak, and there was all these different things, but it's still part of my journey. Even though we talked about it being this very loop-de-loop journey, it's still part of me. And that's where veterans can connect. It's in the, may the forest be with you. May the deployment still be there. May the memories and the heartbreak and the emotions and joy all be part of that. And that's what we share at these events. And so I hope to see you soon, Crystal. I don't know when that's going to be, but I hope to see you soon. I'm really grateful that we get to meet on this part of our journey.
Likewise. And I'm sure there'll be plenty of more opportunities.
Yeah, thanks for joining me today.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.